10 years ago, Joe Eszterhas sold his script Basic Instinct for a record $3 million. The film's subsequent success and his larger-than-life persona made him the world's most famous screenwriter. Some of his films have been big box office hits, some notorious failures. All have been memorable. They include Flashdance, Jagged Edge, and Showgirls. Here is a look at some others.
What's your new book about?
A detective. He falls for the wrong woman.
Ever give Medford a silver jewelry box?
No, I never gave him any gift.
And you never had a sexual relationship with him?
What the hell kind of question is that, David?
That's why they're here, Matt.
You don't have to answer that.
Real life, Carly. It's better than any book. It's better than any movie. It's a soap opera. It's real life. It's a tragedy. It's funny. It's sad. It's unpredictable.
My father, he loves music. This one time, he took us all to the symphony, my whole family. It was supposed to be this really big deal.
I had an affair with somebody. That doesn't mean I killed my wife. Eddie, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you in the beginning. Well, that's why. Because you wouldn't have taken the case. Later on,
Ice skating classes, Mr. Moss. Ballet classes, technique classes, stretch classes, jazz technique classes.
This show is called Goddess. It ain't called Classes. See ya. What kind of classes have you had?
I haven't had classes.
In 1997, Joe Eszterhas disappeared from the public eye. He reemerges this summer with one of the most eagerly anticipated books of the season. American Rhapsody has Washington and Hollywood holding its collective breath in anticipation. It is his take on the presidential sex scandal that engulfed this country for so long. It is also his take on generational politics, rock and roll, and a lot of other things, including some of his own opinions. I'm pleased to welcome you to this table for the first time. Welcome.
Thank you, Charlie. It's nice to be here.
Not the first time you've been invited, but
nice to be
we're glad to get you here.
It really is.
We're going to talk about screenwriting, too, if you don't mind.
Right.
Tell me about this. When did it hit you that there might be, at the other end, an American Rhapsody?
About 3 years ago, I went to Maui and started thinking essentially about my own life and my own values and how I'd become a public figure. And all of those thoughts led me to Bill Clinton because he is the ultimate public figure of our time. He is also the first rock and roll president of the United States, and I had an immediate kind of sympathy and understanding of him, I felt. As I thought about myself, I thought about him in terms of my values, his values, rock and roll values, 60s values, and what they had done to us as adults, as the 60s generation approached being 60. When we came back from Maui, the Lewisnky scandal was blowing up, and I was consumed by the drama, obsessed by the drama of it, and literally became a couch potato, red-eyed, grizzled, hanging around watching the set all the time.
Yeah.
And incidentally, one of the things I discovered was that today, you can have access to most of what happens in a dramatic national situation like that, either through the internet or through 24-hour cable or through live coverage.
But isn't it an amazing amount of repetition if you're watching 24-hour cable?
Yeah, that's why it clearly affected my brain, and I wrote this book. There's no doubt. Certain damage was done, and that's what made me do the book.
It dulls the senses, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. But I have to tell you, then I did all of this research, and I read 200-300 books, and I became a scholar of the Starr Report. And, to the point where I think to my dying day, the banality of the dialogue between Tripp and Lewinsky will follow me to my grave. But in the course of that research, and I mean it was wide, in-depth research, I discovered everything about even any tangential player to this drama, including Charlie Rose had dinner one night with Jennifer Flowers and his then client, Rich Little.
Charlie Rose is, in fact, a lawyer.
Different right, Charlie Rose.
Right.
Okay. 2, Charlie Rose was the subject of a feature in Monica Lewinsky's mother's ill-fated Los Angeles magazine that went down the tube. Personality feature, full interview, all of that.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
Yes. So all of this tangential stuff came crazily coming to play.
You know what else happened to that? That was a story they did about me because I was in Los Angeles, and I didn't even really know what it was about. I took a photograph or something. I forgot. appeared in the dialogue between Lewinsky and Tripp.
Of course it
on
did.
the taped phone conversation, something about mother, blah, 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 whatever.
Of course it did. That's what I mean. It became a scholar of that dialogue.
Yeah,
all these details are creeping out.
Right.
What do you do when you've been poisoned by all these details? If you're a writer, you put them in a book.
Okay, but here's the interesting. So I want to get out on this table what you set out to do.
Yes.
I mean, by telling me you became an expert, you became knowledgeable, you give me a sense of what you brought to the table.
Yes.
You set out to do what? To explain what? To understand what? To communicate what?
I think what I really set out to do was to do a generational profile, a portrait of our values, our culture, combining politics and show business, looking at the pervasive values of both, looking at the notion that politics has become entertainment, and entertainment in many ways has become politics. Playing with things like there is very little difference when the President of the United States has himself photographed with Buddy on the lawn to elicit our sympathy, and the movie star who, before a movie opens, tells us details about his personal life, whether it's a child who was damaged or his own repressed memory or any of those things. It all came together in a sense, and the sub-themes became manipulation, hypocrisy. And in one way, I think, the movie is a kind of, the book is a kind of rant against hypocrisy. You know, and it takes it on from different points of view.
Okay, here, and so you set out to do that. I mean, it's generational, it's about hypocrisy, it's about the cross-fertilization of entertainment and politics and media, all of those things sort of coming together. Tell me how you decided to use the style that you did. In Boldface, you have nonfiction.
Yes.
I mean, fiction.
Yes.
When people, in fact, are giving monologues that you don't know that they said, correct?
Yes.
Tell me what technique you were using here, what it is that you thought was the best way to go after what I consider to be a noble end, which is to get at this notion of generational politics and hypocrisy in America.
The fictional part sort of grew out of the whole. I think that sometimes fiction captures truth in a universal and abstract sense better than nonfiction.
Talk about the president for me, in terms of how you feel about him, both in the context of Lewinsky, but also in a larger sense of a man who is a consummate politician. I had lunch today with someone who knows him well and said he's one of the smartest people I know.
He is indeed.
His range of command, from sports to music to politics to international affairs to fiction, is extraordinary for someone who's
the fiction
a
part's
busy
really,
person.
Yes, it is. The fiction part's really interesting to me because this is a man who, when he came back from Oxford, said to people that he wanted to write novels and carried Thomas Wolfe in his back pocket. This is clearly a man with depth and marvelous intelligence, and I think he's been a terrific president. Where I feel profoundly sorry for him because I think that that he has traded off his public life, and this maybe was one of the seeds of where I began, for a certain kind of inner fulfillment and an inner peace. He has been driven by this mad priapic obsession that's been with him all of his life. And I define it as rock and roll syndrome. He is the first rock and roll president of the United States. Even the way
which is defined as what? Everything goes, I can have what I want, there are no limits?
Well, first of all, culturally it's defined as having come out of the 60s with the music really affecting your life and making a big difference in your life. And then secondly, you know, being a part of that generation who said as it was growing up, what we really want to be is we want to be a rock and roll star. We all aspired to be rock and roll stars, I think, out of that generation. That's what you wanted to be. We may have gone on to be president or screenwriters, right? Yes. But in our hearts, we wanted to be rock and roll stars. Okay. So I think it begins there.
We all wanted to be Jagger.
Yeah, we wanted to be Jagger, and he has been and is Mick, cutting a swath through the groupies. I define him as Mick on Chef Boyardee sauce and Big Macs and Taco Bell, but it's still Mick. And in terms of the behavior toward women, you know, going back to that very famous groupie that he had on, Connie Hamsey, who was truly a national landmark groupie that he had on in Little Rock. And the man went into this vascular frenzy, it's the only way I could describe it, to get her into some room where he could close your Willard instantly, right? And that is the way that he's behaved toward women. I understand that behavior. because for a good part of my life, truly until I approached the age of 50, I felt that same mad, priapic drive. And what I wish for the man, who has been a terrific president, is the personal peace, that he is not driven by this insanity that's driven much of our generation for a long time. He's got to give up the notion that he's a rock and roll star. I gave it up, and he's just got to give it up.
In that, there are a lot of people who wouldn't disagree with you if, assuming whatever the record is. You'll find a lot of people, I suspect, including his wife.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, I think that the relationship is a sad one, because it's been a hypocritical one. He has made a trade-off a long time ago. At a certain point, I think Hillary did too, to sacrifice everything for the notion of getting to the White House. Now, the motivation here was to make this a better America, and I think we have to understand that.
Believing they could do something good for America.
And I believe that they have done many good things for America.
Right.
And the fallout from it, the personal fallout, is huge. There is a chapter in this book told from Hillary's point of view, and most of the women who've interviewed me are really touched by it. It's a chapter that I rewrote 6 times to get it to the point where I felt I get it right, and it's probably one of the chapters I'm proudest of. But I think it delves into exactly that trade-off from Hillary's point of view, and the pain and heartbreak that it's meant to her.
Tell me about it.
In their drive to make this a better America, to get to the White House, and I believe that they have, Hillary became his biggest defender, especially with the charges that were related to bimbo eruptions. That meant that Hillary had to know the details of these things in order to protect him and to protect the presidency. While she did that, it was almost as though she were napalming her own soul, because in order to protect him, she had to know the details, and the details were what caused her the most pain. I have a great respect for Hillary Clinton.
So therefore, it must have been beyond agony to hear Monica Lewinsky's accounts of what went on, and to know it's public.
Yes.
It's one thing to know and know that you're the only person to know.
Yes.
It's another thing if the world knows, and therefore you become not only a subject of pity, but of ridicule.
Yes. Don't forget, though, that this story in different ways could have burst to the forefront with different women through the past 12 years. You know, I think Jennifer Flowers was trashed unfairly, and her character was assassinated, and he finally admitted almost as an irrelevancy that he had had a relationship with her, which she said and had been claiming for many, many years. There was damage done to other people in the process, great damage, I believe, and I think Jennifer Flowers is one of them, in the process of working to get to a White House, to make this a better America. Part of the tragedy was that, you know, as George Stephanopoulos relates in his book, Hillary turned to him and said, "We've got to destroy her," speaking of one of the bimbos. And they did that all the way through, even though many of these women were telling the truth. Only now do we realize that they were telling the truth in retrospect.
Because there was a greater good.
There was a greater good. And that paradox and that ambiguity really fascinates me, and I dwell on it in the book.
You do. Let me... despite all that, I mean, part one of this theme for you and the president is the notion of not being able to find separation from a drive that all of us, or a lot of men, have been part of their life, especially who grew up in the 60s and 70s, which is a kind of rock and roll influence, correct?
Yes, correct.
All right. And some people abandon it because of maturity, because of responsibilities of family, because of different value systems, a whole lot of other reasons.
Yes.
So that's part of what you're trying to say.
Yes,
here.
it is.
And what it means in terms of its impact on our society. The other thing you say here about this president, though, was that you took leave when you saw the famous finger pointing on television.
Yes.
Saying...
Well, that's the part that disturbs me personally. I mean, I frankly didn't care about what happened or what didn't happen in the Oval Office or in the hallway or in the bathroom between Monica and Bill Clinton. But
although you just said you thought it was pathetic what basically she said about him when she walked in.
Pathetic in terms of his own inner being and in his own soul.
Yeah.
But in terms of making a difference to me on how I viewed the president, no. What made a difference to me was, you know, in the 60s we used to say that the truth shall make us free. And one of the reasons we loathed Richard Nixon so much is because, as Barry Goldwater said, he lied out of both sides of his mouth and every other possible orifice that he could lie out of. Okay, and we loathed the man for that. Now, we never imagined that we would have one of ours in the White House, and that he would essentially be in the same boat and lie the same way, and in some ways more forcefully. Because when Nixon said, "I'm not a crook," I think most of us looked at his expression and thought, flat out, the man's lying, because of the way he phrased it. Bill Clinton jabbed his finger, turned red-faced, and looked to me like a guy in a bar who'd been challenged when he said, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Ms. Lewinsky." We
now know as part of that was an influence from Thomason.
Well, we know clearly that it was Harry Thomason's influence, and that's one of the things that really got me into the book, because the militancy and the fervor of that denial came from Harry Thomason saying, "You have to make this really forceful." Yes, right. But it's Hollywood in politics. This is a man who is a very, very successful television producer, who's had very many hits, who's advising the President of the United States on how to act. And it's that, I think Harry Thomason, to me, is the metaphor for the junction that I'm talking about in terms of the linkage between politics and Hollywood.
Characterize your feelings about all this. Obsession?
About?
The whole business we've been talking about. First rock and roll president, right. Clinton the president having not reached the level of maturity you think someone in their 50s should reach.
Yes.
Is this an obsession for you, I guess is what I'm asking.
Is which part of it an obsession?
The notion of how our society's, how this scandal unfolded, how it's reflective of where the generation has come in the 1990s and 2000s.
Well, I think, listen, I'm not sure it's an obsession, but what happened was that as I looked at my own life and my own values and the way I treated women, and what I define as my own mad priapic drive, I started thinking more generally, and it was my own drive and what I felt were my own failures and the compromises that I'd made to become a public man that led me to Bill Clinton. You know, he is the President of the United States. He's the most powerful man on the face of the earth. He is the most public man of our times, and I'm convinced that he's a profoundly lonely and unhappy man. Why
are you convinced of that he is a profoundly lonely and unhappy?
Well, look what he said. Look what he said to Monica when he said, "All I have in my life is work and nothing else." Look what he said to Jennifer when he said, "You know, all I look forward to is the day that you and I can walk down the street with the leaves falling." Look at the way he's behaved, you know, with Connie Hamzy, you know, with Monica, at this cold rock and roll groupie type sex that went on. Look, even in its specificity, with the specific sex that went on, it's a backstage rock and roll coupling. What happened? Fellatio. He didn't even know her name. Rock stars backstage don't know those girls' names, and it's that act that happens.
What would have made a difference? I mean, if you look back and you could rewrite, not in terms of you, but in terms of this evolution of the president, because you, as you just demonstrated, you know everything Monica said, you know everything Jennifer Flowers said from all the tapes and everything else, what might have made the difference? A happy marriage?
Yes, indeed. Tragically, I think a marriage...
everybody says, forward, it's love and work that in the end...
Well, tragically, both components of this marriage made the same trade-off. And that trade-off was the basic trade-off that so many men make. They will lead their public lives, and in their inner lives they will be unhappy. And they will continue doing what it is that they do publicly and keep something on the side or treat women like groupies instead of upending their whole lives, beginning all over again, financially and in all of those terms, to give themselves a chance at a personal fulfillment.
Okay.
And that's what I don't think he's done.
You come to this story. Let's talk a little bit about you, all right?
Yes.
A reporter, Cleveland.
Yes.
Still love the Cleveland Indians deeply.
Deeply.
Went out to Hollywood, were a reporter, a journalist, went out to Hollywood, did some reporting for Rolling Stone.
Yes, I was at Rolling Stone for 4 years.
Yeah. Attempted novels, wrote novels.
No, I wrote 3 books that were nonfiction books, one of which was nominated for the National Book Award in 1975.
And what was that? I've forgotten what it was.
It was Charlie Simpson's Apocalypse.
Which was about?
It was about a generational conflict in a small town in Missouri between townspeople and long-haired kids, which ended in tragedy and death.
And how come screenwriting came into your life?
Accidentally. An executive at United Artists read Charlie Simpson, thought it was really cinematic, and called me and said, do you have any interest in doing screenplays? I was not only working for Rolling Stone at the time, but I was bartending on the side to try to support my first child, right? So when I got a call from Hollywood that said, are you interested? I jumped up and down and said, may I please come down to see you? And then she said, what ideas do you have for a movie? One of them, Fist, was an idea that came out of my own blue-collar background in Cleveland, and that was the first movie, and that's how I got into it.
Was that Stallone?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. And so then you became a screenwriter.
Yes.
And you found out it was lucrative and what?
Fun.
Fun.
Absolutely fun. I loved seeing my words realized on screen. You know, look, in the beginning I was so green. And I talk about realizing words on screen that I wrote a monologue that was 6 pages long. And Norman Jewison said to me, kid, if we put this up on screen, that's 6 minutes of screen time, and they're going to throw tomatoes at the screen. I mean,
yes.
And so, but the whole notion that you know, you write something and it winds up on this big screen and you hear your words was an overwhelming notion, especially for an immigrant kid from Hungary. I was astounded with that.
Now, when did you came over from Hungary yourself?
No, I came with my parents when I was 6 years old.
When you were 6, escaping communist or what?
Well, we left. I was born in Hungary, and we went to Austria, and we were in refugee camps until 50 when I was 6 years old.
You're a screenwriter.
Yeah.
You were happy with that?
Yes.
You still continue to write screenplays? You're going to do that again
Absolutely.
and again and again?
Yes.
Of those that you have written, what are you most proud?
You know, if I write something, I will put heart, gut, whatever I feel into it. Showgirls happen to come after 200 interviews with different people in Vegas, especially women. We wanted to tell a story about what it was like to be a woman in Vegas. We made horrible mistakes in the course of telling that story, but the story was a valid one, and in some ways I think that the messenger was slain.
All right, now this is fascinating to hear you say that. If I have some criticism of your book, it is not your intelligence, and it certainly is not your skill, and it is certainly not your research, preparation, command of material.
Yes.
It is the vehicle, the way you chose to tell this, the mix of memoir, nonfiction, fiction, and all that, because you know, that will be, which is essentially what you just said about Showgirls.
It's
Same
outrageousness, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, you know,
No. The idea is that what you just wanted to tell, the story you wanted to tell, seems a great story to tell.
Yes.
I'm not sure that story was told in Showgirls. That's one person's opinion.
I don't disagree with you, because we made horrible mistakes. The biggest mistake we made was that in terms of the tonal piece that we wanted to do, and I include myself very much in this because Paul really shot that script, we had a horrifying and heinous rape scene at the end of the movie that totally didn't belong in the rest of the movie, and it really hurt the movie. So we made terrible mistakes. But in terms of you know, of trying to tell a story that we felt absolutely was valid to a woman's experience in Vegas, what we both felt was that the messenger was slain because of what we said. And I gather your point here, in terms of the messenger being slain, is what?
Well, not so much the messenger being slain. Well, I mean, more in terms of, I think that you have your hands around a great story to tell.
Yes.
Here, I really do.
Yes.
You know, and I wonder if it gets compromised by the mixing of fact, fiction, nonfiction, memoir, and, you know, the president and all that sends up.
Well, look, I mean, I viewed it as it came together, almost within the structure of darkly...
Let me interrupt you. I almost see two great books here. I mean, I would love to have seen you write a book that was more nonfiction because of what you knew and because of some of your skills, including all the skills of your profession.
Yes.
And ability to tell a story, which you know how to do. And on the other hand, to do something that had to do more broadly with the themes that clearly you feel as a citizen and as someone who's an observer of the way we live.
Yeah, but Charlie, the look
merging
at
the two makes it complicated.
Well, look, but on the other hand, to tell the full story with the kind of humor and outrageousness that I wanted to tell it, come on, Willard has been one of the central players in this entire drama. And I gather that...
With being the president's obsession with his own sex organ.
No, Willard being the president's sex organ itself, right?
Okay.
And he's been very much at the center of this whole drama. And I gather that Willard has been seen a lot, but never heard from. And I made him talk.
Well, you have a chapter in which he talks.
But I did, and I think that...
Because that's humor, that's funny, that's farcical, that's...
No, it also does something else. That chapter shows the relationship between men and their penises.
Right. I agree.
And it's an important chapter on a serious level.
Yeah.
It's also funny.
Yeah.
But I think it's also an important chapter on a serious level.
Yeah. Well, I agree, but I mean, I'm not sure you can tell that story in a lot of other ways, without having, the president. Maybe you've decided that you were so caught. I mean, maybe, and it may be, this is a valid point for you to adhere to. The notion was that somehow the president so personified what you felt and was the best vehicle, the messenger, to tell the story you wanted to tell, the larger story. I mean, in the end, this is not about Bill Clinton only in part. It is your version of the failure of every man.
Yes, it is, and I think it's a true point. I think it's also my profile and my definition of our culture and American culture and the role of 60s men in American culture at the millennium. The book does have a broader theme, but within that broad context, as I viewed myself, I kept seeing Bill Clinton, and the two came together.
Right. Now, back to you. There is this part about your own biography that's also been well told. You're making Basic Instincts. The producer of that film, you introduce him to Sharon Stone.
Yes.
Hoping that he'll fall in love with her.
Yes.
And that they'll develop a romance.
Yes.
So that he will leave his wife.
And he did.
And he did.
Yes.
So that you can leave your wife and marry him.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Now, how do you look back on that as what? Characterize that for me.
I think it's a subconscious explanation for what happened. But I think it's true.
You think it's true?
Subconsciously, absolutely.
Meaning what?
Oh, listen, I did in drawing the link between myself and Bill Clinton.
Yes.
Maybe what I'm saying is that neither of us are saints. Some of us have matured, but neither of us are saints.
Yeah. You want, in the end, would you change anything about this now that you've finished it, now that you've gone through it, now that you've had a time to sort of be...
You mean the book itself?
The book itself, in other words. Any second thoughts about this?
No, I'm proud of the book. I had great fun doing the book. I hope my sense of fun translates to people who read the book. And I felt a kind of oxygen-like creative burst as I did it. I had more creative fun, frankly, Charlie, than I'd had in a long time.
It sort of renewed you.
Yeah, it did. I heard a voice that I hadn't heard in many years in terms of my own writing. Some people describe that voice as the twisted little man that I talk about.
Yeah, I know, right. It's his story as well.
My publisher's wife defined it last night as a startling line of cocaine and literary spirit.
Mrs. Ms. Mehta said that?
Yes, she did. She did indeed.
Does this change your life anyway, having written this book?
Well, it's rejuvenated me creatively. It's really odd to hear a voice inside you that you haven't heard for 25 years as it speaks to you and you write it down in terms of the sentence rhythms, the flow, the musical aspects of the writing itself. All the way through, in all these many years of screenwriting, I've really had to limit myself with description and making things skeletal. Here I could let it flow and give vent to it. And somebody said it's like opening an artery and just letting it flow. And boy, it was fun.
American Rhapsody, Joe Eszterhas, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
Pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time.